I'm currently working on making a custom subwoofer enclosure for 4 audio control Spike 12's. In the previous video, I went through the design process and explained our plan, and in this video, we need to get all of our materials cut and add fine details to each piece to prepare it for assembly. Hey everybody, I'm Mark. Welcome to CarAudioFabrication, the channel where together we learn how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install our dream car audio system. Let's get started. To get our build process underway for our subwoofers, we of course want to start with a solid plan. Now you guys can see more details on the design that I came up with here in the previous video, but I just want to show you guys the blueprint here. We've got the overall assembly view here. We've got the overall dimensions for the enclosure and dimensions locating some of the different pieces inside here. And we then, of course, have dimensions for every single board that is going to make up this enclosure. A quick shameless plug, if you guys need a custom design for your next build, I would love to help you out. You can learn more on my website, CarAudioFabrication.com. It really helps support the making of these videos. So I've got a stack of wood here, rough cut down. Let's get the more finished dimensions applied. And we're going to start with the biggest pieces, the 2 front baffle pieces and the back. When I purchased this material, I had the larger dimension already cut out of the sheet because I knew it just slightly exceeded the max cut size on my table saw, but I could of course also use a handheld circular saw to make those cuts. Now whenever I'm cutting wood for a box, I like to remove the factory edges. I do that because the factory edges tend to get banged up as the sheets are moved around, and I want to make sure that I have a good flat square side. So you will see often where I'll cut off just a small amount of material to remove that factory edge and then flip the board to have that fresh cut edge ride on the fence. Little things like this make a huge difference in the final finish. So throughout my cutting process, I'm going to do my best to continue to remove those factory edges. That way we have these nice, pristine, freshly cut and completely square edges. Now that we've cut the front 2 baffles and the back of the box, we need to cut the top and the bottom of the box. So let's see our dimensions here. They're going to be the same for top and bottom. Let's make those cuts. By now you've got the idea, so I'm going to quickly cut these side pieces along with the port walls and the braces that go inside. With all of these large pieces cut, the next thing we need to do is make some of these small little detailed pieces that go inside, like the air director that directs air through the port there, and then the corner 45s. These pieces feature an angle cut of 45 degrees on each side, so I'll need to do an angle cut on the table saw, but I'm going to start with cutting this dimension first. I'll make one board that is 20.5 inches because that's the height of all these pieces inside of the enclosure. It doesn't really matter the length of that board as long as I have enough to cut all of the pieces from it, and I'm going to proceed to cut each individual piece from that board. Now that we have all of our materials cut to their external dimensions, it's time to start doing some of the detailed cuts on the inside. I'm going to start with this board here, making all of the holes for the subwoofers along with the hole for the port there. And you can see that the plan on this design is to flush mount the subwoofers into the baffle. Now I do want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this video, Audio Control. Audio Control has long been known for their factory integration parts, and they've just recently got into the subwoofer and speaker markets. As you guys know, the subwoofers that we're putting into this custom enclosure are the Spike Series 12's. These have a power rating up to 700 watts RMS. You can see some of the suggested speaker enclosure sizes there, and they also come in a 4 ohm and 2 ohm variety. Quite a few unique features, like the fact that they include these speaker grills. You can take these off if you don't want to use them, but the fact that they're included is pretty nice. And also little things like this, the fact that they include this cutout template that we can use to actually do our layout for these holes, along with including threaded inserts that we can use to bolt these subwoofers into the enclosure. To learn more details about these subwoofers, be sure to check out the full video that I did here on the channel. To begin making our layout, we're going to embrace our inner child and use a pair of scissors to cut on the lines and cut out that circle template. Next, using our design, which gives us the location of the center point of each hole, we're going to carefully mark out our grid locating each of those center spots. So I've got those drawn on there. I've also located the center port cut out here. And the reason for marking out these center spots like this, once you have this template cut out, you can just simply line up the straight marks here onto each of those lines, and that's going to perfectly locate where we need that hole. It's really nice that Audio Control gives us this little cutout template with the subwoofers, because if we were using a jigsaw, we could simply draw out our hole, cut it with the jigsaw, but in my case, I'm going to be using a router, so I'm going to be using this template. These smart templates from our other show sponsor, Mobile Solutions, really make this process simple. We could start to get a feel for what this layout is going to be like, and another thing that I wanted to do really quick is keep in mind this is just the first baffle board here that has the inner cutout for the subwoofers. I'm also going to be making another baffle board that is exactly the same, with the only difference being the cutout holes are going to be larger because they're going to flush mount around the subwoofer. And I wanted to make sure that I'm going to have proper clearance between those flush cut holes, so you can see we are getting very close between each of the subwoofers here. Again, I can't stress enough, you want to have a solid plan before you start building your enclosure in order to avoid issues like that. In this case here, you can see that we've planned for that and allowed all of these subwoofers to fit within this relatively compact space. With our layout completely made here, the next step is we need to rough cut out each of these holes for the subwoofers and for the port. When we're doing this rough cutting, we save about 1/8 inch of material that we're going to clean up and remove with the router in just a minute. Now, because I was already doing the rough cutting for the baffle pieces, I figured I might as well start laying out these brace pieces as well. So I did all the layout work, and then I transferred that over to the rough cutting station, drilled my holes, and rough cut those pieces out as well. So here we have it, our rough cut pieces, and they do in fact look rough, but no worries, we're about to clean this up considerably on the router. To start the router process, we first need to apply some template tape to the back side of our circle templates. With the tape all applied, I remove the backing paper and stick the template in position. Next, over at the router, we're going to use a flush trim bit. This has a cutting flute on the bottom and a bearing on the top. The bearing will ride against the template. Using care to feed the material the correct direction into the bit, we will make the cutting pass, and I like to always do a secondary cleanup pass. So in our case here, I repeat that process 4 more times, and now I have 4 perfectly shaped holes, and in this case right now we're doing the baffle that is going to flush mount the subwoofers in. Next, we need to turn our attention to this port cutout here, and in this case, since these edges are straight, we're going to be using some straight templates. I'll start with again applying template tape, and a good time savings tip for you guys here, when you want to go and peel that backing paper off of the template tape, use an Olfa knife to get that backing paper started and quickly pull it away. I'm now going to stick those straight templates in position, and notice that the pattern that I use here, I start my first template at the edge of this inside cut here. That allows me to have 4 overlapping pieces that don't run into each other, but still allows me to encompass this cutout. Now we can take this over to the router table and make its cuts as well. We can now pop the templates off of our workpiece, and another quick little time savings tip for you, we can use a ball of the leftover template tape, and we can use that to quickly pull off that excess template tape rather than trying to pick each piece away with our fingernail. So we'll repeat those steps on our secondary baffle, and now we have this. Now a quick side note, since I want the port to match up perfectly, rather than putting on those straight templates to cut the port on this secondary piece, instead I stuck these 2 pieces together and made sure that they were completely flush by copying the existing shape to our new bottom piece. So now we can really start to get a feel for what this enclosure is going to look like. This thing is massive, and these 4 12s are going to look super cool. Let's do a quick test fit here. We'll drop the 12-inch spike subwoofer down into its flush mount hole, and this fits perfectly. The precision of using these different templates to make our cutout holes and port holes, it's just perfect. So next, I turned my attention to finishing up these brace pieces. I first used the straight templates, much like before, to cut out each of these windows. And once I had fully routed one of the pieces, I transferred its profile to the second piece because I need 2 of these brace pieces. These are going to add a ton of strength inside the enclosure, tying all of the walls together. Now, as it stands right now, we have these nice, pristine, finished cuts, but there is still a hard edge here. I want to kind of finish off these hard edges and give them more of a smooth look that will allow the air to move in and out of the enclosure more efficiently. And it's also, like I said, going to give us more of a finished look on things like this, the baffle here, and also going to want to address the port entrance. To start, I want to address this hard edge here around the subwoofers. To do that, I'm going to be using this 1/8 inch roundover bit. So we'll make that round over pass on the router, and once we're done with that, this bit gives us this result here. So the reason I went with a 1/8 inch round over is mainly because if I would have went with a larger round over, this area here would have been weird as those two radiuses combine into each other. I would have liked to have gone with a larger round over, but hey, that's what we have to deal with because we're fitting so many subwoofers in a small area. Now when it comes to the port though, I do want to do a different round over size because I have a little bit more distance between the edges here. I can do a 3/8 inch round over radius. So I've got that bit loaded up. You can see it's quite a bit larger. Let's make that pass on the router as well. Actually, really quick before we make this cutting pass, another quick tip for you guys. Right now, if you see that 90-degree corner there where the straight part of the cutting flute is and it meets up with the radius, I've got that little tip perfectly flush with my surface here. And what that means is when we go to cut this profile, the edge of our round over is also going to be completely flush with the surface that right now is on the bottom. Once we're done making the cut and we flip it over, it will be on the top. What I want to point out here is during this step, you need to consider how you plan to finish your enclosure. I intend to use a special speaker box coating, so that's why I'm going to have this tip here flush with the front of our enclosure. But if you were using something like carpet, what you can do is intentionally raise this bit a little bit more out of the table and transfer that 90-degree corner to the front of your workpiece. That gives you a very nice corner to cut upholstery material away. I've done this before on previous videos on the channel. If you want to be sure to check those out as well. So here you go, guys. You can see the effect of using that larger 3/8 inch round over. Much larger there on the port. In the meantime, while I still have that bit loaded up, I'm also going to round over the edges of these pieces here. These are the internal port walls. So as the air goes around the corner of our port and around the entrance of our port, I want to have that round overed as well. One final round over change, this time for a 1/4 inch round over that we're going to be using for the brace pieces. Obviously, we only want to do the insides here. Don't make the mistake of accidentally doing the outside. I've done that before. Only on the inside here to round over these edges. These pieces are also a little bit different in the fact that we're going to need to do both sides. So you'll see me flip it over there and then finish up doing the rest of those round over passes. So here it is, guys. This is what the braces look like now that we've given them the round over treatment. And now that the detail work is complete on our bracing pieces, we now have all of our woodworking done and we are ready for final assembly for this subwoofer enclosure. So in the next video, I'm gonna give you guys some tips and tricks for the assembly of this box because there is far more to this than just screwing it together. If you're new here, I'd love to have you as a subscriber and I'll link that video on screen once it's ready. Don't forget, if you wanna learn more about the Spike series of subwoofers from our show sponsor, Audio Control, check out that link down in the video description. A big thanks to them along with Juan, Jerry, Steven, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible, and thank you for tuning in and watching.